Hey guys, welcome back to another episode. This week, we're going to talk about therapy and connection for our topic. But first and foremost, we're going to talk a little bit about our challenge from the board game episode. So that was trying to find a way, I guess, to be more playful and to get to connect with someone through the games that they play. So kind of learning more about what games other people play and connecting to them on that level. So do either of you guys want to kick us off with that challenge?
I can kick us off. I do not think I connected with anyone on what kind of games they play or played growing up or even learned a new game from anyone. Did not take advantage of that this week. But I do think this week I have just been a lot more playful and silly with my voice and just talking in silly voices and allowing myself room for more silliness and to be playful. So probably met the challenge a little bit there, but I did not learn any new games. But I think I'm going to keep that one in my back pocket and continue to be curious with people. I think there will definitely come a time that it happens maybe even a little bit more naturally too. So,
Yes. Yeah. More of an organic encounter or something.
yeah.
For sure. For sure.
I'm the same. No new games I learned. I didn't get to connect over a game, but this challenge made me think about how lucky I am to have Taylor because he is just a naturally playful person and he loves to create games. So he created this game called leg jousting where you basically just balance one leg and you have to kick with your other leg and you're trying to knock the person down. So it's like a balance game.
Oh, that's fun.
And that is just one example of many of the games he's made just to make life fun. When we're just awkwardly at a family function, he'll be like, "You want to go into the other room and leg joust," which is it's just very us. And it's also just a fun way. I don't feel like I'm as playful of a person. I feel like I take life sometimes too seriously. Yeah, that's what
you guys just sneak off into a
Yes.
bedroom. People are probably thinking you're doing something other than leg jousting.
It's so, but it's so innocent.
Okay,
God,
two
you're
married, yes, two married adults say, "Hey, you want to go into the bedroom?"
It's just that simple.
Yeah. Okay.
And I feel like you guys are very playful people, and I love watching you two play, and it's just gotten me. You guys make me want to be playful, and I've heard your playful voice all day. I feel like you have I'm looking at Courtney. I know the people don't see who I'm talking to, but I feel like you have more of sarcastic humor that kind of just takes me by surprise. So I just love it.
Yeah. That's good.
I love it.
Yeah. I feel like you're very playful too. Yeah.
Yeah. I've been trying to lean into it a little bit more.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're easy to joke around with and to laugh and
Yes.
be, and you're also very easy to be silly around.
Yeah.
Truthfully, I feel safe enough to be weird or say something silly or
That's my
awkward, and
favorite.
you always respond well to it. So I think you're a safe
Respond.
space.
She doesn't run away.
She doesn't run away. She doesn't
like,
look at me like I have 10
oh,
heads.
yeah.
She just laughs. She does that little giggle, and I'm like, all right, okay, I'm so silly.
Amanda's laughing. We're good.
It brings that confidence up.
Yes,
I love to be
exactly.
silly. You could have a whole episode on silliness. I
We
feel like it'd
could.
be so fun.
Yeah. I think, I don't even think I was more playful this week. I think, honestly, okay, and I don't know if this counts because it was in the episode, but in the last episode of Board Games, you were talking about, is it Catan?
Yes.
Catan? And I remember listening to you talk about that and talking about how you play it, and I remember you saying, I'm not a big fan of it. But, that was interesting to me, and I learned about that game through your all's lens. So, not that it really happened afterwards, but during that episode, I did feel like I was connecting with you guys, kind of listening to you talk about the different games
Yeah.
you all have played, because I haven't played just a whole lot of board games or even just card games, whatever. So, I think I definitely was more of the video game person. But
You're just a gamer.
yeah, I'm just a gamer girl. So, but yeah, I think that was interesting. But outside of that, I probably failed this week. So
We're gonna have those weeks.
for sure.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. So
Yeah, life comes up. So totally.
for sure. So yeah. So I don't know. I like the challenge, and I think. Did you say keep it in your back pocket?
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think that's what I want to do with that as well. Of just knowing that it's an avenue and then an opening and a low level connection piece. So
I like how the podcast helps us with social skills.
yes.
Because it's you don't really think about how, you could just talk about your dog and talk about someone's animals or be what games do you play? What do you do in your free time? They all kind of connect those social skills that we talk about, but how we connect with our humans. Maybe one day we'll get to pull that out of our back pocket.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah. And I feel like that's a great segue kind of into our topic of
Yeah.
therapy and connection, right? So, I think some people probably go to therapy for social skills to learn how to use them, especially if you're socially anxious. But before we get too much into that, I just kind of wanted to maybe open the floor and see what your all's thoughts are as far as, how is therapy used for connection and how is it maybe incorrectly used by people? So we're all therapists, right? We all work in the mental health field. And with that, I think we've all probably seen therapy be used almost as a crutch for some people, if you will, beyond the point of you're in this to get better. You're here. I think they're using it more so of, like, "This is my connection." I don't know.
Yeah.
Thoughts from you guys?
I think my first thought is therapy is a unique form of connection.
Ooh, elaborate. Yeah.
Yeah, because it is truly a one and it will never truly be fully a one-sided connection because we're humans
Yep.
and we're people, and there will always be another human and person in the room with you, and yeah, there will always be countertransference, which is just a fancy word for, like, I am a human, so my own stuff will come up in the room. I can't always be maybe as unbiased as I should
Yes.
be, but it is really more of a one-sided connection. Like, I am here to provide support and show up in relationship in a way that is helping you meet your identified treatment goals.
Yes.
Essentially. So it is just a very unique form of connection. That's like the first thing I think that comes to my mind. And so therefore it cannot be a replacement for social connection, for your support system. It can maybe be the like place that I start, the place that I get curious about what I want my support system to be like or how I begin to build that. But it cannot be a replacement for connection. We need so much more than just that one relationship. And we need like a two-sided relationship too, where like you're also supporting that person and they're supporting you and you're in connection maybe over similar interests or all the things that we've talked about on this podcast that can connect us, right? And with their that connection is truly one-sided. It's about the client. It's not about the therapist. That's my answer for that. I'll start there. I'm sure you guys have thoughts and things you can add that are better. I feel like I didn't fully complete my thought there, but
I feel like that's the importance of why we have goals in therapy, which I didn't always put a lot of like emphasis on or even respected to the level that I do now. Of like, that's why you have a goal. That's why you have a focus. I think of therapy as a way to build self awareness in some area of your life of how you show up in relationships or with yourself or um, within the symptoms that you are experiencing. And I think it can almost be addictive if you don't have that self awareness of this is a space meant to almost be like my mirror to help me see myself so I can make a choice to show up differently. I could see people showing and be like, oh, this feels so good. Someone finally listens to me and cares about me and is holding space for me. Um, yeah, I think that's a super important thing for listeners to hear, and, like, we sign up to do that, and it's not something anyone should feel guilty about at all. I think it's just that awareness of it lives within this very special space, but outside of that space, relationships are different.
yeah, and you deserve more than like 1 hour a week of connection
Oh,
too
yeah.
as a human, and you need it.
Yeah.
You need it.
It's very intentional time spent for sure.
And it's intense. Like it's an intense form of connection and you're processing some of the most difficult things and you're sitting in a lot of those difficult things too. So it's just a very unique form of connection. It's my best way of describing it.
So that's what I was thinking when you were talking. It reminds me a lot of like people on social media, right? We see how perfect someone's life looks like through social media and we want that's what we want. So we try to mirror that. We try to achieve that. Therapy and a connection with a therapist is very curated, right? Like as a professional, our relationships with our clients are extremely curated in the sense of I'm treating this person professionally and ethically, and we have treatment goals that we're trying to work on, right? And so that is not reality. You're not every relationship you enter into is going to be hey, I'm a professional and we have treatment goals that we're working on. And this space is designed to make you feel safe and connected. However, that's not, the purpose of therapy, right? Like the purpose is there is an area that you are seeking treatment for. And I think, now I will say I'm more clinically minded, so you guys can disagree with me. But I think for me as a therapist, clinically, my clients are coming to me for treatment. And so throughout the course of treatment, do I want to connect with them? Absolutely. That's how you build rapport. That's how you build trust. That's how you build that relationship to get the work done. But at the end of that, that is that relationship. It is a working relationship. It's a treatment relationship. And there's termination at the end, healthy and safe termination, and sending you on your way to your next part. But that's not reality of connection and relationships, I think, a lot of times. And I think sometimes people might see it as my therapist is my friend, which, depending on how you view that as a professional, that can that can be muddled and it can get very icky very quickly. That's why you have therapists getting reported to the licensing board for dual relationships. That's why you have people who are making unethical decisions in treatment. That's why you have people who aren't making progress in treatment because the therapist is not working in a professional manner and that relationship has no longer stayed, I think, professional and healthy and safe. But that's what people need in that moment. So I'm not saying that it's wrong to create a great therapeutic relationship, but I think sometimes people read too much into that, as in, like, oh, this person is now my friend. It's like, actually, you're coming to me for a service. I mean, you're paying me, so we're not friends, right?
I think some of the words that I really like that you use, it is like, it's a working relationship because it is a relationship.
Yes.
And sometimes the work is the relationship that you build with that therapist, right? And the connection, because that creates safety. That relationship creates trust, safety. All those things are genuinely there in that relationship.
Yeah.
The key difference is like we have goals, which you talked about, and then there's termination because treatment is meant to be short term. That doesn't mean that we don't have to go back to it at times. And short term, meaning like not forever. It's not lifelong. It looks different. It's a different journey, a different length for everyone. But the goal is always to terminate, right? We want to get better. We want to become healthy. We want to feel capable. And that's a really unique part of that relationship is that ultimately the goal is that we separate and that we terminate our relationship because we've been successful.
Yes.
Just like if you were going to see a physical therapist, once you could move your arm in the way that you needed to after you broke it, you would be graduate physical therapy, which then that relationship with your physical therapist would end in a very natural and appropriate way, but it is a working relationship. So that makes it unique because termination is ultimately the goal. It's always the goal because the goal is to get healthy and to reach your treatment goals and to be at a place.
And you shouldn't need your therapist forever if your therapist is good. If your therapist isn't making progress or working with you, then you're probably going to be stuck there for a long time.
Yeah.
That's not. Yeah.
And life comes up. So maybe we ebb and flow in and out as we need it. Just like we go to the doctor during certain periods of our life more than we do others. All those things are natural, but it is a working relationship. I like that word a lot because it is a relationship. It's just a very professional one and one that needs boundaries and ethics to be safe and to be appropriate and to be successful.
Right. And there's money involved.
For.
So, people are paying us essentially for a service, for a treatment. And so it would be very dangerous to take money and, use that as a relationship. Like, oh, I've got a friend. Well, they pay you $300 or whatever a month, a week to see you. Like,
One thing as therapists, like a topic we talk about a lot is self-disclosure. How much of yourself do you show within your therapeutic relationships? And like trying to find this middle ground of like, I'm a very client-centered relationship-based therapist. So like being authentic is very important. A lesson I've had to learn is the boundaries because we're not our clients' friends. We play this super interesting role. And it's not even, I've been trying to think of a word. That's why we have the word therapist. It's just so unique in itself where we want to show up authentically and be honest with our clients and be us, but there are these ways that we keep ourselves safe. Like, when you think of self-disclosure, how much do I share about my relationships or my experiences? That's something therapists in the beginning through our training we have to talk about a lot.
Yeah. And truly that space is meant to be a place where you connect with yourself.
Yep.
And you become self-aware or you learn things about yourself or you discover things about yourself you never knew or become so confident and your self-esteem grows and that you see all these things within yourself or even just regulation is the state of being connected with oneself. And so maybe it's learning to regulate yourself and your emotions. And so it also is like a cool place that you get to connect with yourself. And as we connect with ourselves, it makes it easier to connect with others. And then obviously we have group therapy, which is much different than individual therapy, but that is a place that connection happens a lot. And so I think that's like another cool avenue. And those are typically pretty targeted. There's like a certain goal or purpose of the group. And that's a big connection point. Maybe it's a grief group. And so then I get to connect with others who have experienced grief. And now there's like some understanding. So that is like a different kind of connection too. And a lot of times overshared experiences, which creates that universality, which you talk a lot about. And I think
Yes.
I've been thinking more and more about as we do this podcast is that concept of universality, and group therapy provides that a lot.
Yes, it does provide that a lot. And that's what kind of Amanda, you were talking about like self-disclosure and stuff. And I think where I come from is, I want to be authentic in how I treat my clients, but my clients don't need to know about my relationships or really even about my experiences unless they're directly helpful. So that's typically what I think about each time I make a self-disclosure. But also as a therapist, my goal in treatment is not to make my client like me as a person. My goal is in as a therapist in treatment is to make my client realize, oh, I can do this work and I've got a professional who's going to help me do the work. And kind of like you were talking about, Olivia, like to see yourself and to connect back to yourself. So I don't need my clients necessarily to connect with me on that personal level. I can still show up as an authentic version, but it's not something that I'm going to be, I guess, show forward with just because their needs are different from mine. And I don't want to bring my needs into that space. Again, it's a working relationship, right? My physical therapist, hopefully, should not be giving me therapy sessions. That's not what I'm paying them for, right? If I come to see a mental health therapist, hopefully I'm not talking to them about physical therapy and trying to give them physical therapy because I injured my elbow, and I know like the stretches and stuff. That's not what they're paying me for. So, and I think just to kind of mirror both of you guys, like there's, you know, do I like to use humor? Yes. And that's an authentic part of myself. And if my clients can reciprocate that, then I love incorporating that. And then again, I think it also allows them to connect back to themselves. So if it furthers their treatment or I don't know, helps them to understand more of the universality principle, right? I think there's some benefit to that, but it's, I don't know, something that I'm definitely cautious about. And that's something with group therapy too, because you touched on that. And it's like, as a group therapist here lately, learning to mitigate too. Like, what's safe and healthy group universality versus what's unsafe and unhealthy, because they definitely both exist. And it's very tricky to find that balance because I want to encourage everyone to connect with each other and find that universality. But also, if it's talking about illicit drug use that's going to impact their functioning later on in life, I'm like, oh, I don't actually want to encourage that universality. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Like, what purpose is it serving? Is it, at the end of the day, serving the purpose of this group? If it's to be clean, to regulate, to connect in healthy, positive ways.
Yeah.
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 I feel like, I think the best advice I ever got as I was learning to be a therapist was to go to therapy, like, do the work, experience what that relationship feels like, and I was so lucky to have a phenomenal first therapist because I know a lot of people go, and they have a lot of very negative experiences, and it turns them away, which I think would be a cool thing to talk about, like, therapists are human, and you may meet one and you guys don't click, and I think that it's just an important thing to hear, like, all therapists have different modalities, we have different personalities, we handle or maybe support you in situations in different ways. But I just remember that for the first time, like experiencing that therapeutic relationship on the other end and it being specific to a goal, but also feeling cared about and feeling seen and feeling like someone is, willing to spend that time to support me. But it also makes me think of the termination because I remember the end of you've done these goals. You've proved to yourself that you can do this and you can manage this. And it was so cool to see how empowering it is, like, at the end too. So I just wanted to throw that out there. It's cool to have and very, I think, helpful if you're a therapist to have that experience of going to therapy yourself.
Yeah, it's a vulnerable connection to show up in a space and
Yeah.
be vulnerable with another person. And
Yeah.
yeah, definitely. It needs a lot of level of safety. And if you have, because I want to name it as a privilege, but I always say if you have the ability and the means to shop around for a therapist, I do think it's important to do the 15-minute consultation. If a therapist
Mhm.
provides it, call a few therapists and see who you felt the most comfortable with, or you felt a connection with, or that safety and trust with initially, because that is a big part of it. That ability to connect with that provider is a big part of it. And that's what makes it unique, right? It is a tricky thing. And I do want to name it's a privilege to be able to shop around and to look. But if you have the ability to, I think you totally should, and allow yourself to like explore and make sure it feels like a good fit, just like you would want your doctor to feel like a good
Yes.
fit. That's okay. That's a appropriate thing to do. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think that's something, Amanda, you were kind of naming how, like that termination piece, saying that you can do this. You came here,
Yeah.
you met your goals, you are now able to do what you need to do on your own. And I think well, I don't want to assume that a lot of people do that, but I think there is this trend of people forgetting why they're at therapy in the sense of like truly what is my end goal. And I think that's where we see therapy dragging on for years and years and years without proper termination or without proper progress. Now, if it takes years and years and you are making progress,
Mhm.
great, right? Like Olivia was saying earlier, there's no one size fits all for therapy. Some might last years, some might last 6 months. So, Amanda was talking about termination, doing the work, wrapping up, doing the pieces and getting out and feeling good about that progress that you made. And then Olivia, you were talking about how vulnerable it is to show up in that relationship and be that vulnerable. And that's something that I want to name is I think that's what makes therapy one of those things very, very unique is you're probably not going to be vulnerable with your physical therapist or your doctor or your PCP or whatever that looks like on the level that you are kind of expected to be vulnerable with your therapist, right? The expectation is there is this piece of me that is probably often viewed negatively or ugly or detrimental. And I am laying it out there for this other human to take it and tell me what to do with it and how to change it. And I think a lot of people aren't actually ready for change when they start therapy, if you will. I think there's some resistance because I think some people start therapy with the idea of, I'm going to go in and find out that there's actually not anything wrong with me. And that's just what other people think. Now I think that differs, right? Obviously, if you're struggling with anxiety, you probably want some relief from that. If you're struggling with depression, you want some relief from that. But the relationship piece, the connection piece, if you're going to figure out what's wrong with your relationships, that does require probably a very deep level of you have to be ready to have some layers peeled back that might hurt a little or might be a little uncomfortable to talk about or put out there just because it is very revealing and I think maybe forcing you to have some accountability like, oh, I actually do push all of these people away, or I do reject these people, or I hurt these people. So,
I think something interesting that I'm thinking about, because I think a lot about like I think mental health stigma has it's not that it's not still around, but I think we've seen a decrease in it. I think we've seen it
absolutely.
normalized. I think I can confidently say people feel more comfortable talking about it than we ever have before. Not saying that that stigma is still not there. It's still not around. I'm not saying it's completely gone, but I think we've seen progress in that area. And I'm wondering how much too, like people are seeking out therapy in their life because someone they're connected to or they care about is asking them to give it a try. Yeah. And I think, as I named before, like therapy is truly a container for you and yourself and to connect with yourself. And even if others around you are like saying that you need the support or maybe that it's time to do the work or to look into those things, it truly is like something that you get to choose whether or not you're ready to connect with those parts of yourself. So it's just really an interesting piece, but I do think that's happening more and more, like, partners are setting expectations that, like, "I need you to go to therapy for us to be in a relationship," and I wanna name too yes, therapy is like your container where you do your work, but also we need the connections around us to do the work. Or
Yes.
maybe we learn that the people that we're connected to actually aren't serving us anymore. I think
Yeah.
that can be a really difficult part too when we start to do the work is we see, well, these connections aren't as healthy as I thought they were, or this connection was actually rooted in a really maladaptive, unhealthy coping skill that I
Yeah.
was engaging in. And if I let go of that, then I have to let go of these connections. And I think that's a really complex part about our mental health, too. Sometimes a lot of the connections that we have in our lives or that we create are directly tied to our mental health, or maybe the behaviors or actions we're taking that are a product of the symptoms of our mental health or whatever that may be. And so I think that's an interesting thing to touch on too in this episode.
I feel like what you said, what Courtney said, it like reminds me. I wonder if that's why things get so blurred, is because it's a relationship where I can go there, I can be deep, I could say what's underneath, I could practice all of these social skills, I can say things I've never said to anyone else. So it feels like such an intimate relationship. And then also the therapist acts as an example of secure attachment. So you may go into therapy and be like, wow, like what a different way to connect. I know it's still not, the reciprocity still isn't there. It's still there, that person's being that mirror for you. But I think there's a lot of ways you might say, oh, my relation, I do actually have a mirror to my face now. And I see how I show up in relationships or bring awareness to how I show up here. And then, yeah, my relationships start to change around me, and that could be really hard for people when they go
Mhm.
to therapy, when their perception of the world starts to change because this is a new relationship that shows them different ways of connecting or being a human.
Yeah.
I want to word too that therapists, because we have different modalities, you may go to a therapist that focuses more on the skills outside of that relationship. Where it might be like, let's practice. How do you want to communicate with this person? How are your behaviors impacting this relationship? And then other therapists, they may be the example. Let's practice within our relationship. Let's practice skill together. That's a way that I think it's different too.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like, role play is a huge thing in therapy too, which is pretty cool, right? And that does allow that client that space to practice actually with the therapist. And I kind of liked what you were saying. I think therapy is the relationship with all of its complexities, right, between a client and therapist often will probably serve as one of the healthiest relationships that that person has. And so I think, Olivia, to tie back what you were saying, when you have a client who has maladaptive connections where they have connected through harmful or kind of reoccurring behaviors that get them stuck in their loop versus helping them. When they're coming from those unhealthy connections, from the connections that are making their symptoms worse instead of better, and then they come into a therapeutic relationship that is safe and secure and actually a really good model of what could be. It is. I'm sure a lot of people are probably dumbstruck or dumbfounded by the difference in that. And then I think that makes that relationship even more valuable, right?
Yeah.
And so I think as therapists, I know I've had to manage that a lot. I'm always so flattered when my clients are asking me, can we continue to come see you once we're done here? And as much as that compliments me, it's also that part of no, because this relationship again was a working relationship. There is termination. You have done your part and it is now your turn to move to that next provider, that next step, that next whatever that looks like.
Yeah.
But I think I see it as also them saying, "Hey, this was actually a really good relationship for me, a really good
Yeah.
connection." In the sense of it felt safe, it felt secure, and it felt healthy, which is ultimately the goal, right? But yeah, I think that gets really tricky really
Okay.
fast. So,
Yeah, I just, wanna speak to the clients, in the spot of a client. I remember that termination, it was a loss for me. It was empowering. It was a way of, I did actually do the work, and I did what I came here to do, and I've changed as a person. That was my choice, and this person helped facilitate that. So I just wanna speak to that. It also could feel like a loss, and it's a special type relationship. So I think that's why it's so important as a therapist that you explain the goal of that therapeutic relationship, not just within the extent of the therapeutic goals, but who am I serving in your life right now? And that's where we go to, I want to help you find social connections. If you feel like I'm the only person you can talk to, let's make it a goal that we find some other outlet so we can make that transition where you don't feel that emptiness or that loneliness stays. I think that's really important. Just there's so many parts of being a therapist where you just have to learn to I don't even know the right word, just explain the rules to the game, as Olivia loves to say.
what's the one you've been saying? Concise is kind no, clear is
Ooh,
Clarity is kindness, which
yes.
I totally saw from another social media like influencer. So I'll have to find her name and her profile. But she talks a lot about clarity is kindness, and it truly is. And knowing the rules to the game that we're playing is important because it should be consensual. You should know
Yeah.
what you're getting into. You should understand that relationship. That is a big part of it. There should be consent within all relationships. But yeah, I think therapy can also create the foundation of what to look for in healthy
Mhm.
relationships. What are green flags? Being curious about what about this relationship feels good. And so then when I feel this in other relationships, I
Yep.
feel that I'm finding safety and
Mm.
trust and effective communication within a relationship, whatever that is. But yeah, it can be the foundation. It's just not a replacement, I think is a big piece. Like
Yeah.
you deserve so much more connection and we deserve different types of connection. And I think that is the cool thing too. Like and we've gotten to talk about all the different types of connections we can have. It can just be over like we like to play this game together. Other than that, we have nothing else in interest, like nothing else similar in interest, or we just like to play soccer together and we can
Mhm.
connect through that. So like we deserve to find other avenues to like connect and have our cup filled.
On the flip side, as a therapist, your relationship with your clients will and should never fill that cup for you. So I know
Yes.
that there are people who, through like the genuineness in their heart, want to help people and support people. But I think that's an important thing to verbalize too, is that it's a very social job. You're using your brain, you're socializing, you're conversating, you're practicing, and are actively in these relationships, in these professional relationships. But it's just a great thing to clock. Do I feel like my clients are feeling a part of my cup when that is my responsibility outside of this space? So it's just a great thing, just as a part of your, you know, daily, weekly, monthly practice as a therapist of, okay, is do I feel like any lines are being blurred? Do I feel like this connection with this client is serving something for me or doing something for me socially? And yeah, just a great thing to track. And I think it's a normal thing to talk about. I think it might be a scary thing for therapists to bring up, but it's a great thing to bring up to your supervisor, to other therapists, or within yourself and your own therapy practice. Yeah, it goes both ways. So I wanted to make sure I verbalize that.
Yeah, and I'm glad you did because that's a
Yeah.
huge part is, as a therapist, as a professional, I think we should always be reflecting back on, okay, what is this relationship filling a need that it does not need to fill? And, am I making sure that I'm in check with where I should be at professionally and ethically with this person? Because it can get detrimental very quickly if it is filling a need, right? And you find
Yeah.
yourself wanting to build that relationship or go deeper than it needs to or whatever that looks like. Yeah. So I'm glad you said that
Yeah.
because I think that protects our clients too,
It
right?
does.
Like it protects them from harm. And then it also allows us to be more in tune with ourselves too, right? If I'm noticing this is filling my cup, I do need to make more connections outside of therapy. That's really crucial, I think, to be aware of too. But
Yeah.
yeah.
I feel like dual relationships, they're not always to that level of seriously
Hmm.
detrimental. Like if it's like a sexual relationship with a client, a
Right.
romantic relationship with a client. I think a dual relationship is also like, ooh, why does this client feel like a friend? Like I feel like we're in here and this is like my friend and we're chatting. I think that's something to clock of like, ooh, I don't want this client to feel like they have to pour into my cup. They have to, check in on me, ask me
Yeah.
how I'm doing. Like we truly play the role of that mirror for them. We're their container and we hold that. So yeah, it doesn't even always have to go to that extent. Just something that's good to keep in mind. Yeah, because human therapists are human too.
Yes.
We're trying to find our ways to, connect. So just a very good thing to keep
Yes.
hold of.
Well, and we, as much as our clients need connection, we also need connection. So we've talked a lot about how connection is a need. And so if we're not meeting that need professionally outside of our job,
Yeah,
or not professionally, but personally outside
personally.
of our job, that absolutely can impact our work and how we treat others and how we treat or, how we work with others too while they're in treatment.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I
for
feel like
sure.
we've talked a lot, like just us, about how we take care of ourselves because it's a job where you do have to hold a lot.
Hmm.
I think I've just seen us be very intentional about that within this job. Yeah. I don't know if you guys have any pieces you're thinking of like, this is the way that I get to leave this at work, leave this being a professional relationship, go on. It's like for me, I think it is just being intentional about like every Thursday I hang out with one of my friends and we go to the park and it's a friend that isn't a therapist. For the first normally all my friends are therapists. So it's just cool. Like I know nothing will be about therapy. Like, we love to talk about psychology, but I could just go and I it's just a pure relationship outside of work, outside of talking about clients or work or anything like that.
Yeah, I think mine is just truly this job has been cool because I don't have to bring my work computer home,
Yeah.
like things like that. Like I tangibly don't really bring any even objects with me into my house. And so I think I like allow myself the car ride is a very intentional time to like decompress and run through the day and maybe what the next day is going to look like. And then when I get home, it's just truly like trying to be present with the furry friends and the humans around me and
Yeah.
just be connected with them. And I think that is why confidentiality is so important too,
Mhm.
because like I also what I do talk about and experience in the day is confidential. So it's not something that I even go home and continue to talk about. And it's nice because I get to talk to, the other
Yeah.
professionals with me in the space who are on my treatment team about it and process it then. And then it doesn't leave my
Right.
professional connections. It
Yep.
stays
Yep.
within that space, which obviously creates is ethical and creates safety for my clients, but also for me as well. Like it's not something that I have to process alone or with
Yeah.
other people who are not in the profession too,
Yeah.
which is really an important piece too, is that it
Yes.
just lives in this professional space.
Well, and I think too that piece, in an odd way, confidentiality also, protects my loved ones too from what I'm doing in my day to day, right? So, it's not like I go home and just vent to them because one, it's confidential, but two, I can't expect them to understand what it is I'm venting about when, they don't work in this career
Yeah.
and they don't know what that feels like every day to come here and to hold what other people are giving you. And they have their own stressors, right?
Yeah.
So probably the last thing people want is for me to, again, you can't because it's confidential, but if we did, the last thing most people probably want is to hear about how traumatic a client was in a session or, what that looked like. And now you're having to hold that. Now you know it. And it's like, yeah. So,
It's definitely one of the most awkward jobs when people ask you what you do because there's like not much to talk. I can't really tell you about
mhm,
the detail. I can't tell you. I can say, I specialize in this and this is where I work. But it's normally one where people get very silent. Like they don't really know how to ask questions. And that's okay because that's a part of our
right.
job is we
Yeah.
keep the confidentiality, we keep things safe, very
Yeah.
private and
Mhm.
professional.
I think that's why it's important for us to have professional connections and
Yes.
colleagues though, like and I think that was, like, the main reason that came to mind for me is, like, you all are such a big piece in me being able to go home and connect with others because I have my professional connections that I can, like,
You get to process it.
process it
Yep.
and leave it with and can help me hold the hard days, and I think that's why it's so important for all of us to have colleagues and supervisors because we also need support because we are humans, and so that professional support I think is a big
So
piece of
okay.
that. Do we have any challenges for this week? This would be a hard episode
It
for me
would
to
be.
think as we talk about, like, well, it's all really confidential and it lives in our
Right.
professional
Yeah.
spaces and
I have an idea, but we didn't really talk about this subject. Basically, it's like the concept of labeling. What is this relationship for me? Because we have like people that are friends and our family, and maybe this is more like surface level. I feel like we've talked about that surface level relationship. Maybe it's like, do I feel like I'm getting my needs met in all my in my areas? I feel like I could word this better. Do you guys
Well,
hear what I'm saying?
and correct me if I'm wrong,
Uh
but
huh.
kind of what I'm hearing you say is, maybe the challenge is that we go through and we identify what each relationship is providing us. Is that kind of what you were getting at? What, am I connecting because this is my family and I love them? Am I connecting because this is something fun that I want to do and this person does it with me?
Yeah.
Am I connecting because this is a working relationship between me and my physical therapist and I broke my ankle, so I've got to work on that? Is
mhm.
that
Yeah.
kind of what you were?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like a similarity to therapy, I guess I'm gonna connect this back, is like if you have a friend and because they're going through a lot, maybe you feel like a lot of times they're getting to express a lot of things and maybe you don't. Um, and maybe it's just identifying, do I have a relationship where I feel like the reciprocity is in there, or maybe that's the goal. Maybe it is a therapeutic relationship, and I feel like I'm trying to get a different type of need met through that. So yes, labeling might be kind of a confusing one.
No, I think I like it.
Okay.
Yeah, just
I think
getting curious about what your relationships in your life and what needs they meet for you.
Yes.
Yeah, and maybe you'll find that some relationships, you're meeting a lot of their needs and it isn't reciprocal,
Yeah.
or maybe you'll find, wow, this person meets a lot of my needs, and I feel like maybe I need to show up for them in that way too. Like maybe we'll start to get curious. And I want to name too, like relationships should be reciprocal outside of therapy.
Yes.
And depending on where that person is at, you might be giving 70 and they might only have 30 to give. And there might be a time where you only have 30 to give and they're giving 70 too. So also that, like, it's not always 50-50. We don't, we're always going through different times. So maybe you're in a place where a lot of your friends are giving you 70 right now because that's what you need. And you've shown up for them in that way too. So that is still a reciprocal, healthy relationship. I want to name that as well. But yeah. Okay.
Good.
So getting curious about what needs our friendships or relationships and points of connection are meeting for us.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just like this person I move my body in a healthy way with, and that's what our connection provides me. Yeah, cool. All right.
That sounds good.
I can do that. Sounds good.
All right. Thank you guys for tuning in.
Yeah.
And
Thank
we
you
will
guys.
see you guys next week.
Thank you.
Thank
Say
you.
goodnight.
Bye.
As always, please remember, you are someone's human connection and you are never alone. If you're experiencing a mental health crisis or emergency, please call 988-911 or a crisis response unit in your area. Disclaimer: the thoughts, opinions, and topics discussed in this podcast are not intended for mental health treatment, service, or diagnostic purposes. All opinions expressed are solely those of the host, co-host, and guests. Resources mentioned can be found in the written show notes. Thanks again for tuning in to the